I'll ask him how to play something, and then he just proceeds to be Eddie Van Halen. And
Wolfgang Van Halen was born into a legacy way too loud to fade into the background. As the son of a straight-up guitar legend, he grew up surrounded by walls of sound, riffs, and rhythm. But while the whole world watched Eddie Van Halen change the face of rock forever, Wolfgang was living a story that very few ever saw behind closed doors. What was Eddie really like when the cameras stopped rolling? And why did Wolfgang swear off playing a single Van Halen song after his dad passed away?
when I was really young, he legally gave it, not that I was going to steal it, but he gave it to me, you know.
There's a side of him most people have never seen, and the truth hits harder than you'd expect. From the start, Wolfgang William Van Halen's life was anything but ordinary. His father, Eddie Van Halen, was one of the most groundbreaking guitarists in music history, while his mother, Valerie Bertinelli, was a beloved actress lighting up American television screens. Fame was practically his family business. But for young Wolfgang, it wasn't all flashing lights and applause. It was lessons, memories, and a bond with his father that would shape his soul forever. Music wasn't just around him, it was him. While most kids were learning their ABCs, Wolfgang was already vibing with drum beats and guitar tones. Eddie wasn't just a rock god to the world. He was a dad who lived and breathed music, believing his son should explore it freely, with curiosity, not pressure. He didn't push Wolfgang toward the spotlight, but he made sure the instruments were always within reach, just waiting for the spark to hit. That spark came fast. At just 9 years old, Wolfgang started jamming on the drums, not with fancy lessons, but by figuring things out on his own, just feeling the groove. When he turned 10, Eddie handed him his first real drum set, a gift that meant way more than a pile of sticks and cymbals. It was his father's quiet way of saying, "This is ours. Music is what connects us." Wolfgang once shared how Eddie would record raw ideas on a tape recorder, and there he'd be, just a kid, trying to copy those sounds on his drums. Those late-night moments were sacred, a father and son communicating through rhythm, completely lost in their own world of beats and sound. But drumming was just the beginning. As time went on, Wolfgang started picking up more instruments: guitar, bass, piano, teaching himself each one with pure passion and zero ego. He wasn't trying to outshine Eddie or prove himself to the world. He was just following his love for sound, chasing melodies that felt real to him. He'd spend hours experimenting with riffs, scales, and notes, getting lost in the magic of creation. He wasn't trying to be Eddie Van Halen. He was learning to be Wolfgang Van Halen. He respected the legacy, but he also knew he had to carve his own lane in a house filled with roaring amps, late-night jams, and musical history echoing from every wall. In 2006, at just 15 years old, Wolfgang Van Halen did something that shocked the entire rock world. That teenage fire and raw skill took him straight onto the biggest stage imaginable. He officially joined Van Halen as the band's new bassist, replacing longtime member Michael Anthony. The move sent fans into a frenzy. Some called it bold, others called it crazy. But everyone was talking. Many questioned if bringing Eddie's teenage son into the legendary band was pure nepotism. But those who really knew the Van Halens understood the truth. It wasn't favoritism, it was evolution. Wolfgang had spent years quietly preparing for that moment. He knew every song like the back of his hand, had watched countless rehearsals, and jammed along in private for most of his childhood. This wasn't a kid being handed a golden ticket. This was a young musician stepping into a legacy he had already lived, breathed, and mastered. His spot in the band wasn't a gift. It was earned through years of dedication, sweat, and a bond between father and son that ran deeper than any stage light could shine. When the tour kicked off, the stakes couldn't have been higher. Imagine being a teenager playing bass on the same stage as your father, the man who reinvented rock guitar, and in front of thousands of die-hard fans who grew up worshiping those songs. Wolfgang handled it with humility and heart, never trying to steal the spotlight, just holding down the groove with rock-solid precision. Critics who came in skeptical had to admit the truth. Wolfgang brought a spark that made Van Halen feel alive again. He respected the band's history but gave it a freshness that only someone raised inside that music could deliver. By 2012, Wolfgang's run with the band hit a massive milestone with the release of A Different Kind of Truth. It was Van Halen's first studio album in over 14 years, and his bass lines didn't just hold up, they stood out. Confident, creative, and completely his own, Wolfgang's playing elevated the record while giving Eddie's guitar room to roar at full power. He wasn't trying to copy anyone, not Michael Anthony, not even his dad. He was laying his own groove down, and fans could feel it. For Wolfgang, though, this was never about fame or headlines. It was about making music with his father. Behind the loud crowds and blinding lights, there was something much heavier happening. Eddie's health was quietly declining, sometimes painfully visible to those paying attention. But no matter what, Eddie never let sickness steal his fire. When he stepped on stage beside his son, the music became his medicine, his reason to fight, his way of saying, "I'm still here." Wolfgang would later share how much those tours truly meant. Every flight, every meal, every rehearsal. They weren't just part of a rock routine. They were moments, real, precious moments between a father and son who knew their time together was limited. They laughed, played, and shared the stage like it was their private world, even as the shadow of cancer loomed over them. Those weren't just concerts. They were memories being written in sound and light. Every note, every chord was a love letter between father and son, performed in front of millions, but meant only for the two of them. Behind the flashing lights and roaring crowds, most fans had no idea how much weight Wolfgang Van Halen carried on his shoulders during his father's darkest years. While the world saw Eddie Van Halen as the unstoppable guitar genius, smiling on stage, shredding solos that melted faces, behind the scenes, things were far more complicated. Eddie's brilliance was unmatched, but so were his battles. He was a man torn between pure genius and painful perfection, constantly fighting his own demons while trying to keep creating magic. Eddie Van Halen didn't just play the guitar, he completely redefined it. His revolutionary tapping technique, using both hands on the fretboard to unleash a storm of lightning-fast, otherworldly notes, changed rock forever. Before Eddie, guitar solos were just technical showpieces. After Eddie, they became wild rides, emotional, unpredictable, and straight-up thrilling. What made his style so iconic wasn't arrogance, it was curiosity. He didn't play to show off, he played to discover. Eddie once said he saw the guitar as a tool with no manual, and every single day he was figuring out a new way to bend it to his will. Whether it was his homemade Frankenstrat, a guitar literally built from spare parts and duct tape, or his wild use of volume knobs, harmonics, and feedback to twist sound into something alien, Eddie was always experimenting. He wasn't chasing fame. He was chasing the sound that no one else could hear yet. Then came one of the most legendary moments in music history, 1982. Michael Jackson invited Eddie to play a solo on Beat It, and what happened next was pure lightning in a bottle. Eddie walked into the studio, listened to the track a couple of times, and within minutes laid down one of the most iconic solos ever recorded. It sliced through pop and rock like nothing else before. And get this, he didn't even take a paycheck for it. Money and fame meant nothing to him at that point. Eddie just wanted to make something unforgettable, something that would outlive all of them, and he did. But genius comes with a price, and Eddie's fire burned dangerously close to the edge. For years, he wrestled with addiction. Alcohol and other substances became his escape, sometimes fueling his creativity, sometimes destroying it. His struggles weren't plastered across tabloids. They hid in long studio nights that blurred into mornings and shows that started late because the pain wouldn't stop. Bandmates noticed, family worried. But Eddie kept picking up that guitar because no matter how bad it got, music was the one thing that never left him. In later interviews, Eddie didn't sugarcoat it. He admitted that during Van Halen's glory days, he was often drunk on stage, not because he didn't care, but because he couldn't stop. The pressure of living up to a legend to his own impossible standard was crushing. Everyone expected brilliance every single night, and that pressure became a cage. Perfection was both his superpower and his curse. And when the man behind the guitar started cracking, the band felt it too. Eddie wasn't just demanding on himself, he was demanding on everyone around him. Van Halen was famous for its chaos, endless lineup changes, clashing egos, and public blow-ups that fans still talk about. The fights over direction, the feuds between singers, the creative tension, it was all part of the storm swirling around Eddie Van Halen's brilliance. Eddie Van Halen was a man on a mission, focused, fiery, and totally uncompromising when it came to his craft. He demanded the absolute best, not out of arrogance, but because he believed the music deserved perfection. Every note had to mean something, every solo had to hit like lightning. But that same perfectionism, the thing that made him a genius, often clashed with the strong personalities around him, creating the kind of tension that would define Van Halen's wild, chaotic legacy. At home, though, that fire softened. As a father, Eddie was different, more open, more vulnerable, more human. Wolfgang later revealed that even in the darkest days of his father's addiction, Eddie never stopped being there for him. They'd jam together, share meals, and laugh like nothing else mattered. But Wolfgang didn't sugarcoat it. There were rough days, days when the fog of addiction took over, when the laughter faded and the music had to wait until the pain passed. In the early 2000s, Eddie's battles turned physical. He was diagnosed with tongue cancer and underwent surgery that removed part of his tongue. For a while, it seemed like he'd beaten it, but the hits kept coming. His hip began to deteriorate, forcing another surgery, and his energy drained bit by bit. Still, Eddie refused to give up. He kept recording, kept playing, kept living through the music even when his body was breaking down. Behind closed doors, though, the struggle was brutal. Eddie was haunted by fear and anxiety about his health. He became more withdrawn, skipping interviews, avoiding cameras, and spending long nights locked in his studio. That was his sanctuary, the one place where he still had full control, where he could shape his pain into sound. But to those who truly knew him, the truth was obvious. Eddie was hurting, not just in his body, but in his heart. Decades of pressure, regret, and loss had built up, and even the greatest guitarist alive couldn't solo his way out of that kind of pain. Even in his final years, Eddie never stopped creating. His studio was filled with hard drives packed with riffs, melodies, and entire unreleased songs, music that no one had ever heard. Some people close to him say he knew time was slipping away, that he was racing the clock to leave behind something lasting, not for fame, not for headlines, but for his son. Because at the center of all that genius, all that chaos, was one unbreakable truth. Wolfgang was his reason. Wolfgang wasn't just a bandmate, he was Eddie's anchor, his light in the darkness, his motivation to stay sober, his reminder that life still had something worth fighting for. In Wolfgang, Eddie saw redemption, another shot at love, music, and peace. That bond between father and son became the heartbeat of Eddie's final years, the one thing stronger than all the noise, all the fame, all the pain. But Eddie's story wasn't just about guitars, addiction, and music. It was also about love, the women who shaped his heart, the marriages that tested him, and the relationships that bled through every chord he ever played. For all the chaos that surrounded Eddie Van Halen, The arena shows, the studio marathons, the public feuds. There was always a quiet thread running through it all. Love. Eddie's most famous relationship began in 1981 when he married actress Valerie Bertinelli, a rising Hollywood star known for her role on the hit sitcom One Day at a Time. Their wedding was a media frenzy, a perfect picture of a rock god and a TV darling. For a while, they were seen as one of Hollywood's golden couples, beautiful, talented, unstoppable. But behind the glamour, their love story was far from a fairy tale. Fame, addiction, and long stretches apart slowly wore them down. Still, out of that complicated union came the one thing they both loved more than anything in the world: their son, Wolfgang. Their son, Wolfgang Eddie Van Halen, was destined for music greatness before he could even walk. Eddie named him after one of his musical idols, Wolfgang Amadeus Mozart. That wasn't just a fancy name choice, it was a statement. Eddie had a deep respect for classical music, especially how Mozart mixed flawless technique with pure emotion. By naming his son after the legendary composer, Eddie wasn't just paying tribute to the past, he was setting the tone for the future. From the moment Wolfgang was born, music wasn't just in his blood, it was part of his very identity. But as Wolfgang grew up, the cracks in Eddie and Valerie's marriage started to show. The endless touring, the fame, and Eddie's struggles with addiction slowly built a wall between them that love alone couldn't tear down. By 2001, they had separated, and by 2007, the divorce became official. Still, what's truly remarkable about their story isn't the ending. It's how much love remained even after it was over. Despite everything, Eddie and Valerie stayed close. Their bond as co-parents was unshakable. They worked together to raise Wolfgang with grounding, warmth, and honesty, even while the whole world watched his every move. While Eddie was a rock god to millions, to Valerie, he was still the man she'd shared a life with, the one she knew better than anyone. And in interviews, she often spoke about him with a mix of tenderness and pain, acknowledging the hurt they caused each other, but never doubting the depth of their connection. That complicated love came into full light after Eddie's passing in 2020. Valerie's tribute hit like a punch to the heart. She wrote, "Maybe next time we'll get it right." Those few words carried decades of emotion, regret, forgiveness, and a love that never really disappeared. It wasn't bitterness, it was closure, and it told the world that no matter what happened between them, there had always been love lingering underneath the chaos. Later in life, Eddie found love again with Janie Lizevsky, a publicist and former stuntwoman who brought a new kind of calm to his world. The two married in 2009, and their relationship was more private, more peaceful, a totally different rhythm from the storm of Eddie's past. Janie stood by him through his toughest health battles, offering strength when the world saw weakness. Their love wasn't about fame or headlines. It was about quiet mornings, slow moments, and the kind of peace Eddie had been chasing for decades. Even though the ghosts of his past never fully disappeared, Janie gave him stability, something real. Friends said her presence helped Eddie focus on healing, both physically and emotionally. For the first time in a long time, he had balance, a love that didn't demand anything but honesty. For Wolfgang, watching his father's journey through love, heartbreak, and redemption had a powerful impact. He didn't just grow up seeing the fairy tale parts of love. He saw the real parts too. The arguments, the silences, the forgiveness, and the effort it takes to make something last. He saw his parents' pain, but also their respect for each other. And that shaped how he saw love as an adult. That emotional depth carried into Wolfgang's own relationship. In 2023, he married his longtime partner, Andrea Alsop, a software engineer who had been by his side through everything, from the devastating loss of his father to the birth of his solo career. Andrea wasn't from the rock scene. She was the grounding force Wolfgang needed while he built a life beyond the Van Halen shadow. Their wedding wasn't flashy or loud. It was intimate, deeply personal, and full of meaning. But one small gesture that day said more than any speech ever could. Wolfgang left an empty chair for his father. That chair wasn't just a symbol. It was a message. A quiet, powerful reminder that even though Eddie was gone, his spirit was still there, right beside his son, watching proudly. For Wolfgang, love was never just about romance. It was about memory. It was about honoring what came before, but not letting it chain down what came next. He learned from watching his parents how love could be powerful, messy, and still meaningful. Instead of running from those lessons, he carried them forward, building something stronger and steadier for himself. He found a partner who didn't just understand his past. She helped him carry it, without being crushed by the weight of it. And in doing that, Wolfgang made room in his life not only for love, but for healing. Eddie's own relationships were never simple. They were complicated, passionate, and raw. They were filled with mistakes, forgiveness, and loyalty that somehow outlasted the chaos. But even through all that, there was always effort, always love trying to survive in its own way. And now, as Wolfgang builds his own family, those lessons live inside him. The patience, the empathy, the determination, they show up in how he treats his wife and in how he honors the people who came before him. But when Eddie Van Halen's long, brutal battle with cancer finally ended, the silence that followed was deafening. For the world, October 6, 2020, was the day a guitar god died. But for Wolfgang, it was something far more personal. It was the day he lost his dad, the man who taught him how to tune his first guitar, how to record his first riff, how to keep chasing perfection without losing his soul. Eddie Van Halen passed away at 65 after a long and private fight with cancer. Officially, the cause was a stroke, but by then he had already endured years of surgeries, chemo, and pain that few ever saw. Behind closed doors, he fought with everything he had, and when the end finally came, Wolfgang and Valerie were right there, holding his hand as he slipped away. It wasn't just the end of an era. It was a moment that split Wolfgang's life in two, before and after. In that instant, Wolfgang lost more than a father. He lost his anchor, his mentor, his best friend. The man who had taught him patience, creativity, and how to let emotion drive the music was gone. But even more than that, he lost the one person who saw him not as Eddie Van Halen's son, but simply as Wolfgang. In the months that followed, Wolfgang was shattered. He tried to stand tall in public, posting a heartfelt statement that broke millions of hearts. He wrote, "I've had so many dreams lately where Pop and I are just doing normal things, and then I realize it's a dream. I stop whatever I'm doing and hug him for as long as I can until I wake up. He was the best father I could ever ask for. Every moment I shared with him, on and off stage, was a gift." Those words were raw, heavy, and painfully human. They came from a son who wasn't just mourning a legend. He was mourning his dad. Behind the tributes and headlines, Wolfgang was completely wrecked. The grief wasn't loud, it was slow, suffocating, and constant. He described it later as something that just sat there, right in the middle of his life, swallowing up joy and stealing the spark from even his proudest moments. No matter what success came his way, the emptiness followed. Eddie had been cremated, and his ashes were entrusted to Wolfgang, a symbolic, almost spiritual passing of the torch. It wasn't just about the music anymore. It was about memory. Eddie hadn't just left behind riffs, awards, or guitars. He had handed his son his legacy. The story, the spirit, and the sound all now lived within Wolfgang. When the time finally came to say goodbye, Wolfgang chose to scatter his father's ashes off the coast of Malibu, right by the ocean Eddie loved so much. Those waters had always been his escape, his peaceful spot away from the noise and pressure of fame. But even as the waves carried his father's ashes away, the grief didn't fade. It deepened. While the world buzzed with talk of a massive Van Halen tribute concert or a reunion with famous guest guitarists, Wolfgang made a move that no one saw coming. He said no. He refused to play a single Van Halen song live. In an interview, he explained why, and his words hit straight to the heart. Songwriting is a very therapeutic thing for me. I can get through things that I can't through talking or otherwise. That's a big reason why I don't ever want to play Van Halen songs, because I only want to play with my father, and he's not here to play it. For Wolfgang, performing those songs without his dad wouldn't have been a tribute. It would have felt like pretending the loss didn't exist. Playing those riffs without Eddie's energy beside him would have been hollow, like a ghost performance. So instead, Wolfgang decided to carve his own path, to make something entirely his own. That bold decision sparked the birth of Mammoth WVH, his solo project, a name with deep history. Mammoth wasn't just some cool title, it was the name of Eddie's early band before Van Halen even existed. It was a full-circle moment linking father and son across generations of sound. When asked why he chose the name, Wolfgang smiled and said, "Growing up, I told my dad that when I had my own band, I'm calling it Mammoth. And here we are." That one line said everything. It wasn't about replacing the past. It was about continuing it in his own voice. The band's debut single, Distance, dropped just a month after Eddie's passing, and it hit like an emotional thunderstorm. The song wasn't meant to be released at first. Wolfgang wrote it in those painful final months of his father's life, as a musical letter to the man he knew he was losing. The lyrics were honest, aching, and filled with love that couldn't find the right words any other way. But what truly broke people's hearts was the music video. Instead of fancy production or concert clips, it was raw home footage. Just Eddie and Wolfgang through the years, laughing, goofing around, living their best lives as father and son. No stages, no crowds, just real life. Fans got to see Eddie Van Halen not as the untouchable guitar god, but as a dad who adored his kid. And for Wolfgang, it was the only kind of tribute that felt true. The song exploded online. Millions of views, thousands of emotional comments, and waves of fans saying they'd never cried harder at a rock song. Distance struck a universal chord, and soon Wolfgang found himself nominated for his first Grammy, a career milestone that under any other circumstances would have been pure celebration. But for him, it was bittersweet. He later said the whole experience felt strange and surreal, like it was happening to someone else in another lifetime. But instead of stopping there, he kept pushing forward. In 2021, Wolfgang dropped his full debut album, Mammoth WVH, and the rock world took notice fast. This wasn't a nostalgia trip or a tribute record. It was tight, modern, and emotional. Every track showed skill, maturity, and depth far beyond his years. Critics praised the album for its clean production, melodic power, and lyrics that cut deep without ever feeling forced. What shocked people most? Wolfgang didn't rely on his father's fame for even a second. He played nearly every instrument on the album himself. Guitar, bass, drums, you name it. It was all him, putting his heart into every riff and rhythm. He wasn't chasing the Van Halen sound, he was defining his own. Wolfgang often talks about how his dad always pushed him to walk his own path. Eddie never wanted him trapped under the weight of the Van Halen legacy. He wanted him to be himself. That freedom, that blessing from his father, gave Wolfgang the strength to say no to expectations and yes to authenticity. And that's exactly what defines him today. Every performance, every interview, every choice to keep Mammoth WVH as its own thing, Wolfgang keeps proving that honoring someone doesn't always mean repeating them. His message hits hard. Grief doesn't have to be loud to be powerful. Sometimes the most beautiful tribute isn't a guitar solo or a concert. It's creating something brand new and letting their spirit live quietly in the spaces between the notes. Even now, years after Eddie's passing, Wolfgang still feels the weight of that loss. But what he did next took everyone by surprise. Fans spent years waiting for a big public farewell, a huge tribute concert, a Van Halen reunion, or maybe even a cover album packed with guest stars. But Wolfgang's real tribute, it was already happening, and most people didn't even realize it. In interviews, he made it clear, saying, "I think just doing what I do is enough of a reference and tribute. Just me existing and continuing to be my own person in my own musical space. That's enough of a tribute and respect toward the life he gave me and the interest he instilled in me." At first, some people didn't get it, but those who were really paying attention knew exactly what he meant. Wolfgang didn't need to copy Eddie's music or live in his shadow, because he was the living tribute. Every song he writes, every show he plays, every moment he pours himself into music from his own heart. That's him keeping his father's spirit alive in the most honest way possible. Of course, not everyone agreed. Some fans were confused, and a few critics got frustrated when he refused to play Van Halen songs live. But for Wolfgang, it wasn't about running away from the past. It was about protecting it. He understood that without Eddie, Van Halen's music would never feel the same again. Trying to recreate it without him would have felt empty, even wrong. Then came one of those internet moments that showed just how tough it is to be Eddie Van Halen's son in the public eye. During an interview, Wolfgang made a light-hearted joke about how his dad ruined the '80s by inspiring so many copycats. It was clearly a joke, a playful nod to how Eddie's brilliance changed everything, but social media twisted it completely. Suddenly, headlines made it sound like Wolfgang was disrespecting his own father. He jumped in fast to set the record straight, reminding everyone that no one admired Eddie Van Halen more than he did. He explained that it was just a funny observation about how too many guitarists tried to copy what could never be copied. It was another reminder of the emotional tightrope he walks every single day, trying to honor his dad's legacy while also carving out his own name. Carrying the Van Halen name hasn't been easy. Wolfgang has talked openly about the pressure, the endless comparisons, and the grief that never truly fades. But through all of it, he's shown the strength to keep going, not by trying to become the next Eddie, but by becoming the first Wolfgang. His story isn't one of imitation, it's one of evolution, courage, and love. He's leaned hard on his family for support, especially his uncle Alex Van Halen, Eddie's brother, and Van Halen's powerhouse drummer. Though Alex has stayed mostly out of the public eye since Eddie's passing, he's remained a quiet source of strength for Wolfgang, offering guidance, wisdom, and a deep reminder that the Van Halen heartbeat still lives on through family and music. Wolfgang's journey is far from over, but one thing's for sure. He's proven that true legacy isn't about replaying the past. It's about building something new that still carries its spirit forward. So now, we've got to ask you, what's your favorite memory of Eddie Van Halen? Was it a concert, a riff, or maybe a moment that made you fall in love with his sound forever? Drop your answers in the comment section below. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe to our channel for more incredible music stories, and click on the next video on your screen to keep the rock history rolling. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.